Our mind has certain demands we must fulfill and certain restrictions we must not entertain. If we fulfill the demands of our mind, we'll have joyful, happy, successful, and fulfilled life. If we entertain the restrictions, that will lead to minor and major consequences in our life. For example, eating healthy food, exercising every day are the demands of our mind, demands of life. If we fulfill those demands, we will have healthy lifestyle. Instead, if we keep snacking, that is a restriction from our mind. It cannot take that. That's why the more you snack, the more guilt you feel inside. That is an indication, that is the bell that is ringing inside you, that you are doing something that is not approved in a way, that is a restriction from your mind for your body. That is a physiological restriction. On a mental level, for example, this also applies to, for example, alcohol, smoking. They all are anything that declines your health in long term. That is a restriction. That is a physiological restrictions from our mind. Similarly, on a mental level, for example, social approvals, social attention, chasing after short-term pleasures, chasing after materialistic possessions so that we can elevate our status in society, striving hard, struggling to improve buying power. All these things are restrictions from our mind, from our life. Our mind does not like seeking approvals, seeking attention, and chasing after short-term pleasures. That's why every time you behave in such a way, you feel guilt inside. That's a very strong restriction from mind. So how do we know what are the demands and restrictions of our mind? It's very simple. The very first thing is anything that improves mental health, any idea, any thought, any thinking process that improves mental health, it's a demand of your mind. Positive thinking, in short, is a demand. You need to keep constantly feed positive ideas. It's like exercising for your mind. And you should not entertain negative ideas. That is like snacking for your mind. That will ruin your mental health. That's number one. And second point is understanding short-term pleasures and not chasing after short-term pleasures. So sacrificing short-term pleasure is a demand from our mind. And if you would like to understand what short-term pleasures are, I have given a link here. I have made a comprehensive video. Please go through it. So every time you chase after short-term pleasures like smoking or alcohol or seeking attentions, seeking social approvals, all these things are short-term pleasures. And the more you chase after short-term pleasures, the more depression, the more stress you are going to feel. So that is a restriction from your mind. You must always give preference to long-term gains. That is a demand of our mind, long-term gains, not short-term pleasures. And the third point is following our intuitions is a demand of our mind, particularly spiritual intuitions, connecting ourselves with something higher than us. That is a spiritual intuition we have. Following those intuition will bring a lot of joy and peace in life. And psychological values, confidence, determination, patience, persistency, all these things are psychological demands. All these values, we must cultivate these values. These are the demands from our mind and our life. And the restriction is obviously the negative values, being lazy, wasting time, being negative, lack of confidence. All these things are restricted by our mind. They are again like snacking. That's going to ruin your mental health and also your long-term lifestyle. And another thing is biological demands. Biological intuitions like marriage, relationships, friendships, these are really important to live a happy and joyful life. Physiological demands, I have already spoken, the health, eating healthy food over snacking all the time. So finally, constantly focusing on the long-term gains and sacrificing short-term pleasures. That is also a major demand from our mind. Every time you sacrifice your short-term pleasure, you feel happy, you feel joy. That is something unmatched. And you walk towards experiencing that fulfillment in life. So every time you give in to the short-term pleasures, you are ruining your mental health and also your long-term life. So in short, we must always follow the demands of our mind and always not entertain the restrictions of our mind. Our inner authority, we spoke about inner authority in my previous videos. I have given a link here again. If you haven't watched it, please go through it. It has a comprehensive information on how inner authority works. So our inner authority constantly encourages us to fulfill the demands of our mind, of our life, and also constantly discourages us discourages us from entertaining the restrictions. Every time we entertain some restriction, it creates conflicts inside our mind. That conflict is the stress. That is the indication that you are doing something wrong. Even though it gives some pleasure in short term, it's going to have a major consequence in long term. So in short, we must always strive to fulfill the demands of our mind, of our life, and stay away from whatever the behaviors, attitudes, thinking process that are restricted by our mind, restricted by our inner authority. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.